Most of us are completely enamored by the finished product. We applaud the champion on the podium, celebrate the breakthrough innovation, and envy the thriving empire, completely ignoring the grueling, silent vacuum that birthed them. Right now, you are standing in that vacuum. You are working grueling hours, pouring your finite energy into a vision that absolutely no one else can see, feeling the crushing weight of isolation pressing down on your chest. This isn't a sign that you are failing. It is the definitive tax of exceptionalism. Every extraordinary human breakthrough in history required a period of absolute isolation, a lonely chapter where the old version of you must die so the leader you are meant to become can emerge. You are rapidly running out of the luxury of time, and every single day you spend doubting this friction is a day you delay your purpose. You can either misinterpret this heavy silence as defeat and retreat to the safety of the mediocre crowd, or you can accept that this is exactly what hard feels like. Embrace the isolation and use it to forge an unshakable foundation that no future storm can destroy. A man's psychological architecture is uniquely tested when he chooses to pursue a vision that separates him from the safety of the tribe. We are biologically wired to seek connection and belonging, yet the pursuit of exceptionalism fundamentally demands that a man steps away from the crowd to build his foundation in absolute silence. This voluntary isolation is not a rejection of community, but rather the essential investment required to transition from a seeker of approval into a builder of certainty. Experiencing the heavy weight of this lonely chapter is the precise moment a man's internal framework adapts to the burden of leadership. When the external noise drops to zero, he is forced to discover a deeper intrinsic purpose that operates entirely independent of the fleeting applause of an audience. A man's deepest drive is to build something of lasting significance, yet the architecture of a true vision requires him to lay the foundation in complete obscurity. In a culture obsessed with instant visibility, his psychological resilience is tested by his ability to work when no one is watching or cheering. This silent phase forces him to anchor his effort in a long-term purpose rather than the fleeting high of external recognition. True vision demands that a man measures his progress by the integrity of his daily execution rather than the feedback of the crowd. Operating in this vacuum allows his internal framework to shift from seeking validation to establishing unshakable competence. A man's character is never calibrated during moments of ease, but rather within the intense psychological friction of his darkest hours. When he faces deep internal resistance and the constant temptation to capitulate, his internal framework is actively rewriting its definition of capability. This psychological friction acts as a crucible, stripping away superficial motivations and forcing him to confront who he truly is when all external support systems vanish. True leadership resilience cannot be purchased through shortcuts or inherited through status. It must be earned in the quiet struggle of the lonely chapter. For a man navigating this mental battlefield, enduring the intense psychological weight builds the structural capacity to anchor others through future storms. A man compromises his infinite potential the moment he chooses the warm comfort of the crowd over the harsh reality of his own vision. The natural human drive for safety constantly whispers that fitting in is a survival mechanism, tempting him to dilute his ambitions to stay accepted by the tribe. When a man succumbs to this collective comfort, he trades his long-term fulfillment for immediate, low-stakes security. Protecting your ultimate purpose requires an intentional decision to reject the safety of mediocrity and stand completely alone. Navigating the lonely chapter means accepting that the crowd will never understand a path they are not built to walk. A man bleeds his most valuable resource when he constantly scans the horizon for external validation, in isolation. In the quiet of the lonely chapter, looking outward for a sign that he is on the right path becomes an exhausting obsession. True energy stewardship requires an intentional decision to stop seeking confirmation from a world that cannot see his internal vision. When a man redirects his focus inward, he preserves the precise emotional fuel required to sustain his execution. Operating at absolute zero external validation is the ultimate crucible for a man's psychological endurance. When there are no accolades, no applause, and no reassuring words to validate his sacrifice, he must become his own source of certainty. This shift forces him to anchor his daily actions in a commitment to his own purpose. By taking absolute ownership of his mental ecosystem, he ensures his drive is entirely self-sustaining. A man's final legacy is never defined by the moments he stands under the bright lights celebrating a victory, but by the quiet resilience he forged when nobody was watching. In our culture, men are often conditioned to hide their struggles, masking their deep vulnerability behind a veneer of constant achievement. True leadership requires a profound shift in perspective, recognizing that the grueling, isolated friction of the lonely chapter is not a detour from your purpose, but the foundational architecture of the legacy itself. The hardships a man experiences while building in absolute obscurity are what give his future message its gravity and undeniable authority. Inspiring the next generation requires a man to endure the heavy silence of his personal crucible so he can eventually offer a blueprint of hope to those who follow. People do not deeply connect with a flawless track record of easy success. They rally behind the leader who can look them in the eye and say, "I have been exactly where you are." When a man takes absolute ownership of his struggle, his isolated survival transforms into a collective roadmap for the tribe. By leaning into what hard feels like today, he anchors an unshakable standard of resilience that empowers others.